Welcome to the Irish NFL Show. We're looking back at the key talking points from the Week 14 action brought to you by our partner QuinBet. Over the weekend's action, we saw the Bills get their mojo back, the Chiefs lost their cool, the Cowboys gave the doubters something to think about, and the 49ers finally broke the watch party curse. Owen and the 49ers faithful, we're happy for you. As always, we have plenty more to talk about too, and there's still 2 games down for decision, of course, with the heaping helping of Monday Night Football ahead of us. The Giants host the Packers, and the Dolphins welcome the Titans to Hard Rock Stadium this evening. The Dolphins now 3rd in the betting to win Super Bowl 58, and they are favoured by as many as 2 touchdowns against the Titans tonight, Brian.
Yeah, that's right. It's floating between 13.5 to 14 points. It seems to be kind of fixed at 14, which kind of says a lot for where these 2 teams are. One going for the number 1 seed, and the other one who's essentially is looking ahead to the offseason. You would expect that 14 points could be covered by the Dolphins. And then on the other side, obviously, you got the Giants Packers, which is the main Monday night game, I guess. And they're 6.5 point favorites with QuinBet. Check out their odds, QuinBet.com, and some specials, QuinBet.com // promotions. But as you can see, I'm decked out. I'm ready for the midnight oil. I'm ready for the coffee, the cups of tea, and maybe even an odd beer, depending on how Tommy Cutlets is playing throughout the course of the early hours of tonight leading into Tuesday morning.
Well, best of luck with that, Brian. Good luck to the G-men in their action later on this evening. Colin, we might start with the Bills, though, because pretty difficult few days for them with the Von Miller situation and also that Sean McDermott 9/11 controversy rearing its head 4 years after those comments that he made, ill-judged comments he made in the locker room, to put it mildly. But they pull out the win against the Chiefs. Have they finally turned the corner, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the Bills have had quite the roller coaster of the past few seasons. Ever since that 13 seconds game, Connor, the comments by Sean McDermott, obviously ill-advised, probably led to the greatest barrage of memes I think I've ever seen one thing lead to. But what was fascinating about it was Sean McDermott kind of failing to, the non-apology apology appeared, which
don't put me on the platform there with the day hat on. It was not what I would have advised him to do anyway.
Interesting one. Von Miller, very serious accusations. I wondered, I had picked them the other day because I just think that the Chiefs are rocking, but I picked them on the basis of Josh Allen. And I think in terms of turning the corner, I don't know, Connor, but I think when you have Josh Allen and when Josh Allen is prepared to do, just put the team on his back. Like, there were amazing throws. There were decisions not to throw the ball, which were actually really smart. And there was the point of which he carried 6 Chiefs players into the end zone. He is a special player. He is a supernova. He is capable of, leading them certainly into the playoffs. How deep they can go with that defense, I don't know. But I thought, he was the difference in this for me. Without Josh Allen playing at the level that he is, and I know undoubtedly we'll be mentioning, one Dak Prescott and the MVP race. You mentioned the Dolphins. Tyreek Hill is there, but I do think that Josh Allen's not going to get it, but he is so important. Like, he is the Buffalo Bills at the moment.
Brian, I know we know better than to get carried away by one win, and all the Bills have done is joined the fairly lively 7-6 club in the AFC. Everybody wants to be 7-6 at the moment in the AFC, which still puts them outside the 7 spot right now. But that was the kind of win that the Bills have been looking for. They, damn near pulled one out against the Eagles the other week, to be fair to them, and only a massive Jake Elliott 59-yard field goal in the rain ultimately ended up keeping them at bay, and then they dropped that one in overtime. So it's not as though this is without any fanfare whatsoever. Despite their struggles, the Bills haven't been an easy out for any team in the AFC, and they probably met the Chiefs just at the right time, and we'll talk about the Chiefs in a little bit. But it's exactly what they needed after a terrible week, and maybe makes us look at them in a slightly different light going down the stretch.
It doesn't for me, to be honest. I'm still not sold on them. Josh Allen's numbers against the Eagles was off the wall numbers. Like, his passing percentages, his completion rate, his rushing yards of 83 yards. Yesterday, his highest completion was 27 yards. He only ran for 22 yards yesterday. Column's right, you put the team on his back, but in terms of how they played of late, I think they've actually played better in other games and have come out the wrong side of them. I didn't think they played, I suppose, a complete game for 4 quarters. I mean, they scored 14 points early on. They only scored 2 field goals thereafter for the entirety of the game. And I suppose you can put the credit on a Chiefs defense that found the way to slow it down, and there was opportunities late on for Mahomes, for Allen to connect with Davis, who when he was wide open and he missed that play. But I wasn't blown away with him. It's a very important win, and certainly just put them back in the contention, bearing in mind the other teams that are there. But
I mean, it's fair enough though, Brian, I suppose, as you say, because win notwithstanding, you're still looking at them going, well, probably a lot of the same flaws are still there. There isn't necessarily a credible number 2 receiving threat apart from Diggs. You know, it's a bit of a supporting cast of mid players after that. Kincaid obviously has been a very bright spot for them. Defensively, they've been up and down, did just enough yesterday. But again, this was a big win for them. It took a lot of pressure off them, and you know, given the psychology of their rivalry with the Chiefs in particular, it's probably leaving them with a bit of pep in their step going down the stretch. I don't think, put it this way, I don't think a lot of teams are lining up to play them.
No, I suppose the Cowboys will fancy the chance of lining up to play them this weekend. I know we're going to come to that game later on over the course of the year. But you're asking, I suppose you're looking at the bigger picture here, and here's where we are in the playoff structure and who's going to ultimately make the playoffs. And you're looking at coaching. I don't trust the head coach, and I certainly don't think Colin does, bearing in mind Colin's frustration in the Eagles game was the fact that John McDermott didn't know how to manage the play clock. And if it wasn't for the nature of how the game ended last night, that would be the talking point today. It would be how McDermott yet again struggled. 2:12 to go.
I think what he needs to do, Brian, is he needs to bring them together like a team, like people facing adversity and overwhelming odds who need to accomplish a goal together. Struggling to think of an analogy here.
He looked so relieved at the end because I think he knew himself he got out of a hole. We're talking about the 13-second fiasco for years, but that nearly last night was as bad. 2:12 to go, and you don't make the Chiefs use a timeout. You go pass. And then 1 yard completion.
Oh, that blew up our WhatsApp last night. To be fair, that was a pretty dire exhibition of game management in that spot.
Terrible. And you give the Chiefs the ball with 1:54, 2 timeouts, and
there you go, Patrick. Go and do us all over again. Yeah,
I think we all expected them to ultimately be the one coming out victorious. It wasn't to be, and obviously we'll probably get into the refereeing decision. We give out when referees make bad decisions. Today, people are giving out because they made the correct one. You can't win if you're in the zebras.
Well, let me uncork me a bottle of column right now, because I mean, Chiefs really moany over this one. And like one of the things I took away from this game was they've kind of dealt with, and I was looking at the drop statistics today for starters. The Chiefs are top of the drops. They literally have more drops than any other team. They have a higher drop rate than any other team. The drop rate average in the NFL. So that's balls that are deemed catchable with the right effort by a receiver. A catchable ball that the receiver gets hands on but doesn't corral, doesn't take in to complete the pass. The league-wide rate is 4%. The Chiefs are at 8%. It's not just what you've seen with your own eyes. It stacks up over the course of a season. This has been a wretched problem for them. Nobody has stepped up alongside Travis Kelce. Flashes here and there, but nothing consistent. And it seems, Colin, as if the frustration's finally boiled over, but it's found really the wrong outlet here. I mean, if there's a more egregious example of offensive offside, a play that very rarely gets called, you know, which ironically all the Chiefs have done is just call attention to Kadarius Toney's absolute incompetence in this spot, and another terrible mental error from him. And they really, it seems like their anger is directed in the wrong place.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But a couple of things, Connor. Not all that frequently called, but increasingly so. It's been called 11 times this season. A point of emphasis. And like yesterday at the podium was absolutely ridiculous. Well, where at the podium was ridiculous. Leaving the field was ridiculous. What
the exchange between Mahomes and Allen, where Allen's like, "Jesus, just say good job and wish me well for the rest of the season. I don't need to hear your crap."
Absolutely awful stuff. For the best quarterback in the league. It is frustration, but where do you want to begin? Like, even if anyone has seen the videos, and if you haven't, check it out. Kadarius Toney looks towards the ref, barely acknowledges, points, and then inches forward, right? So even in a best case scenario, right, if you want to say that Toney got the okay, which I don't think he waits to get it, he still inches forward after that, right? But why should the referee hold the player's hands? What's that about? Is the referee supposed to every time? Does this go in every sport? Are football referees supposed to tell players when they're taking a throw in, this is what you're to do?
Well, let's go back to the Super Bowl last year. Maybe the ref should have said to the cornerback, "Oh, let go of the jersey there," and the Eagles would have won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you want a warning. It is. Now look, that to me, you call it but to give a warning is ridiculous. Kadarius Toney is a big boy. Put on your big boy pants and the decisions.
I don't think he is, Colin. Though I really don't think he is a big boy.
He is, but he's been pampered. He's been pampered throughout college, and he's been pampered now in the league, and he's been pampered in that Patrick Mahomes is frustrated at him, but rather than taking him out, I just thought it was an awful look from the Chiefs. Obviously, it was what they went with. You've had Andy Reid had a moan. You've had all the players in the locker room. You had Brittany Mahomes all over social media. We know what Jackson Mahomes is like. I thought that if that had happened to the 2018 Chiefs, the 2019 Chiefs, I don't think you'd have seen that sort of reaction. I do think it comes down to kind of what you were talking about at the top of this. It is the frustration. The receivers have been really, really poor. But I think the referees, as you mentioned, are in an impossible position. In football, Arsenal had a goal disallowed for the right reason, and the ref is being blamed because Jamie Redknapp doesn't feel it was the right decision. We're back
brilliant win for the Villa, and imagine if that had gone the other way. I can't think of a more.
But it's all in the fields. It's crazy town. Mahomes is saying, it doesn't really matter. So why are you calling it? It is. We are well and truly through the looking glass when we're going off of hope and feels rather than what actually happened.
Let's flip it around, Brian. If that play is allowed stand and the Chiefs win the game on that touchdown, the Bills are rightly aggrieved and would be raining down fury on the refs, and we'd have the zebras in the spotlight yet again. You can't win if you're in the black and white uniform. You make the right call, absolutely nail it in what changes the result of the game in the right direction, and people are throwing darts at you. Reid and Mahomes, given the role models they are, have a responsibility in that spot too.
I 100% agree. I just can't. I can't get over the uproar of it today because it is the right decision. There's two elements to it. If the defensive player is offside on the other side, the linesman can't see that player is offside if he's encroachment because Kadarius Toney's in his way. If Toney's in the right position and a player jumps before the snap and they get the free play, did they just say no? It's no flag. We're not giving you your free play, or we're not giving you the 5 yards. The Chiefs, on the other hand, would be screaming blue mortar for that. It's clear frustration of other issues, and they're trying to utilize this opportunity. And Andy Reid today has doubled down on it. He did his press conference, albeit remotely, this afternoon, and he's saying, I'm going to have to advise Kadarius Toney better that he needs to speak more switched on about making sure the referees are comfortable with this. This is bonkers. They shouldn't know their own job. They shouldn't be looking for referees to be giving them a dig out. Ultimately it's down to the Eagles game on a Monday night where they dropped the ball in key situations with the Kelsey fumble. There was last week's game where Scantling and other players, they don't have the players around them this year to get where they need to be. And yet, strangely enough, they've leapfrogged the Jags into the 3 seed because the Jags lost. So, whilst they're probably out of 1 seed, they're still going to get a home game in the playoffs.
We'll talk later about which teams are actually lined up best to win the Super Bowl and what each of them needs to do down the stretch, and maybe both of those teams might well be in the mix. I won't tip the hand there before we get there, but one team that definitely is in the mix right now, Colin, is the Cowboys. We've been saying all season, yeah, it's fine. You're stacking wins against sub 500 teams. That's all well and good. Go beat somebody that actually is somebody, and then we'll start talking about the Dak for MVP hype, and then we'll start believing in the Cowboys. Well, a 33-13 beatdown of the Eagles is pretty much what the doctor ordered for the Cowboys, who finally get to silence the doubters, and I'm sure in their typical humble way will be smiling to themselves.
No, impressive from the Cowboys. Impressive from Dak. Ever since they've come back from the bye, they have been really, really good, and they looked really, impressive on both sides of the ball. You would have to say last night the defense has played pretty well. Obviously for a couple of years now, but this was the offensive tweaks. I certainly had questions about Mike McCarthy. I had questions about moving on from Kellen Moore. But, since they, as I said, since the bye, they have looked really impressive. CD has been fantastic. Dak has been really good. But it is I suppose, the addition of, Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson. I think Ferguson gives them so much more of a threat at tight end in comparison to Dalton Schultz, and he stretches the field. He's more athletic in his ability to get yards after the catch, and I think having Cooks there, it gives you a different sort of option as well. And I think when you have CD playing as well as he is, you have Gallup, you have Ferguson, and you have Cooks. That's very, very impressive, Connor. And we will see. We'll get into it a little bit later in the show in terms of what January might look like. But up to now, they have been impressive. Interesting game, I think, on the road in Orchard Park upcoming. But nobody is going to want to face, I think, the Cowboys at the moment.
Here we go. Brian, one person who rarely gets props is Mike McCarthy. He becomes a little bit of a punchline, or has been in recent seasons. Comes back off, a pretty serious bout of appendicitis. Has the appendix sucked out. Back at the coaching duty for the weekend. I saw Bucky Brooks giving him some serious compliments on X earlier, saying he's a stone cold assassin as a play caller, looks at the bigger picture and knows what he needs from both his defense and his offense, and is underrated as far as his ability to call a game as offensive coordinator is concerned. Probably about time we gave him some flowers too.
Well, it all kind of stems back to the Aaron Rodgers experience, because Aaron Rodgers kind of, in a weird way, got him ran out of town in Green Bay, and let's not forget he won a Super Bowl there, and everyone felt the relationship was stale at the end. You have to wonder whether it was Aaron Rodgers as opposed to Mike McCarthy. And then last year, when they got knocked out of playoffs, it was all about Kellen Moore moving on to the Chargers. I mean, where's the Chargers offense right now with, okay, Herbert got injured last night, but over the course of the season, like, that's gone backwards. So you'd have to wonder. He's been really aggressive on fourth down in particular. I think he recognized he has a great defense there. Like, people were suggesting he's a very run-orientated head coach, but he's been very expansive with the playbook. But then again, as Colin alluded to, when you've got players such as Cooks and Gallup, who's been floating under the radar because of the nature of the injuries he's had over the last couple of years, he comes to the fore last night. Lamb's having his best season.
It's not that long ago, CD was kind of issuing a plea for help to Jerry Jones in the offseason, saying we just need one or two more receivers here to get us over the line. Whereas now they look like they have much more variety to their passing game. That, as you say, they've got the run locked down. Zeke going has been addition by subtraction, really. And between Ferguson and between Gallup and between Cooks, they look much better set up than they were last year or the year before.
Yeah, we had John Machota, who covers the Cowboys for the Athletic. He's really good. And when they made these trades in the offseason, he said this is a sense of a team that recognizes that they're only one or two players away from really being able to push on. And you go and bring in marquee players. Like Gilmore had a bit of a shaky start, but you saw last night how strong and what a player he was. I mean, he's a two-time Super Bowl champion. He kind of steps up in the bigger games. But for me, again, I know we're probably going to touch on the Eagles. It's this Eagles defense. 34 points, 42 and 33. That's what they've given up over the last three games. So, as well as the Cowboys played last night and have been played, like, there's some serious concerns right now for this Eagles defense in particular. And offensively, they only scored 6 points because they got the fumble returns. Like,
yeah.
I always felt the Cowboys were in a much better position to win this game than the Eagles going into last night.
Well, Colin, let's talk Eagles then, because as Brian mentioned, they have they've really struggled on both sides of the ball in some senses. They were stoned twice by the Niners on two otherwise good looking drives in the first quarter last week, settled for field goals both times. Similar story against the Cowboys. defensively, they've just not been able to hold up. And if they're not getting home, if they're not getting to the quarterback with the pass rush, there's nothing behind it. And they've been exposed now by, to be fair, some of the better teams in the NFL. There's a couple of ways of looking at this, I guess. The Eagles have serious deficiencies and not a lot of time to address them. On the other hand, overtime game against Buffalo, defense on the field for a long time, short turnaround to play San Francisco, best team in the league right now. They come out of that meat grinder and they're straight into Arlington to face the Cowboys. So it's a brutal run of games if you think about the Chiefs rather, and to start that 4-game stretch. They have a much easier run in now, and maybe we see a better version of them heading into the playoffs, but not a lot of time to turn it around.
Yeah, but and I do think they have obviously an easier stretch. But again, are you trusting this Eagles team to get it right in the playoffs? And maybe that will come to that. But I think up front, Connor, is probably the biggest issue. This is an Eagles team who last year were monstrous, and they created all sorts of issues. They were so far ahead in the number of sacks, and they put you in a bind because they tended to get ahead early, and then what they tended to, you ended up having to chase the game. That allowed them to pin the ears back. That obviously hasn't been the case this year, but I do think it's partly obviously a personnel thing. You lose somebody like Hargrave and it's an enormous loss, but I do think the coordinators piece is huge here. And I had my I suppose issues with Jonathan Gannon. I Shane Steichen, I think it's obvious, that he is a gifted play caller, and I think losing him has been an issue. Hurts hasn't looked the same. They've had injuries on the line, but they also get away from the run too quickly, I feel, and that is an issue that Hurts is trying to force it. I think Hurts is playing injured. I think there are lots of issues for this Eagles team, and obviously when you play against the likes of the Cowboys in Jerry's world, when you welcome in the 49ers who have a point to prove, it's going to be talk of not just the spotlight, stadium floodlighting is going to be put on the issues that you have. I think, look, they're making the playoffs, obviously, but do they scare teams? Do they like outside of AJ Brown, and does the Eagles offense scare you this season? And is there anyone on the defense that really scares you when you compare it to what they did last year? I don't think so.
All right, that brings us to an end of our first segment of Talking Points for Week 14. Brian, let's start our second segment of Talking Points with the slate of QB injuries, which grows by the weekend. It does seem particularly high this year. It's hard to keep track of some of the backups that were in. I found myself frantically flicking through notes at the weekend to see who Easton Stick was. It sounds like something that you use to stick the handle back on a door, but Easton Stick was the man up for Justin Herbert going down. CJ Stroud in the concussion protocol after the weekend. Jake Browning at one stage had to leave the game for A.J. McCarron to come in for the Bengals, but thankfully turned out to be all right. He had cramp in his hand. Looked like he might have injured his throwing hand for 1 minute, but it turned out he just didn't take on enough fluid. Possibly the excitement of Joe Burrow giving him his box in the stadium might have gone to his head, and he forgot to drink his Diorolite before he went on the field. But it is an issue now. It's going to decide certainly how the playoff picture shakes out in the AFC for good or for ill. On the plus side, you might have Joe Flacco actually rolling back the years as he is for the Browns. On the downside, you might be struggling as some of the other teams in the AFC are in a big spot.
I think we got to give Flacco a bit of credit. Maybe we need to get off the monkeys off the back, I would say, with him, because last week he played well, and a lot of people said, it was an element of surprise going in there. But I know he had a few flaws yesterday with some interceptions, but by and large, he had a really strong game, and the Browns have obviously confirmed he's the starter for the rest of the season. He gives them their best opportunity to make the playoffs. I think they're recognising where they are. Essentially, right now they're sitting as the 5th seed in the playoffs. But yeah, for other teams, and we're going to see CJ Stroud in concussion protocol, and they revert back to the original quarterback who they drafted in the 3rd round a couple of years back to get them to the promised land. They look like they hit a bit of a wall yesterday in terms of maybe the enormity of winning that big game last week against Denver seemed to catch up with them yesterday. And but ultimately, it is going to come down. This is why we talked about in the offseason when teams and Dolphins obviously haven't had to utilize Mike White, but we spoke about like signing these players, and that's why like Giants, for me, it's surprised that they didn't bring Tyrod Taylor back in, because you're signing these players in, for these opportunities and these moments coming into the back end of the season. Not so much the Giants, but just in general for teams, that they have a really solid quarterback. And by and large, like Gardner Minshew has done a really strong job there. Obviously, yesterday he had a difficult day, but you got to look at these teams and think who's got the experience and who's got the know-how to navigate these games. Some of them don't, right?
Flacco didn't look like that for the Jets last year, which is one of the reasons they let him go. Yet another one through the fingers that they may regret. Although we'll get to Zach Wilson. Zach is back.
Let Colin take that one.
Well, I mean, like I will say in fairness that the Texans look. The Jets defense is for real. We know that. I suppose what was surprising yesterday was how poor the Texans defense was. And yeah, Zach Wilson was that his best game for the Jets? So, of all his time there?
27 to 36, threw for over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks.
And it was the manner of some of the throws. Like a couple of big third down throws. I saw JP Acosta. I'm a big fan of his stuff. He's been on with us a number of times. He highlighted that like Zach Wilson rolled out the pro day throw. This is what got all of the hype. If you go back, if you remember pre-draft, there was this amazing pro day throw that people were very excited about. And we got to see it on the field yesterday, but it was like nothing worked for the Texans. Now, losing your top 2 targets, Stroud didn't have anywhere to go. It started last week. I think for the Broncos, Connor, they probably will feel that they should have blitzed Stroud earlier. They started in the second half last week, and it's funny, right? When you put something on tape in the NFL, other teams sit up and take notice immediately. We'll probably get to talk about the Lions in a little bit. I think that's an issue that the Lions have had. I think this is an issue probably the Eagles are having something. When somebody shines a spotlight on a weakness you have, other teams hone in on it. And the Broncos may have started it, but my goodness, the Jets finished it yesterday. And Stroud obviously now horribly in the concussion protocol, that any sort of head injury, I get really, really worried for players. But you'd have to say the Jets did a masterful job, and the Texans they looked lost yesterday.
It's one thing to your point, though, Colin, that we probably didn't give enough credit to the Patriots for when they were in their pomp. Like, they self-scouted better than any other team. Like, they knew that if you showed the same look too often, the people got wise to it, and they usually diagnosed their own weaknesses or their own tendencies before other teams did, and used it against them. Masterfully so against the Rams in that Super Bowl, where they put Jared Goff in the blender and sent Sean McVay home with a migraine, trying to think it all up again, which to his eternal credit he did, albeit with a change of quarterback to help him get over the line. But Brian, it's thinking of the consequences of Zach Wilson down the stretch. We were just a week or two ago saying this was a team waiting for the headshot to put them out of their misery. They haven't gone away, Are
you suggesting they're in the playoff mix? I mean,
look, I speak as a fan of a team that is officially in the hunt. If the graphic says it must be true.
Threw the Raiders in there last Thursday night as a funky team. Let's not call the Jets a funky team, because let's bear in mind this game was 0-0 at halftime. I mean, it was 2-0 at halftimes yesterday in the NFL, and the Jets couldn't do anything with the ball in the first half. And then the second half, it's touchdown, fumble, touchdown, field goal. So the lights went on at halftime. But I listened to New York radio quite a lot, and on Friday, a lot of them suggested the Jets would win this, and I was taken back by it. But they said, because the Jets are going to do what the Jets always do, which is to win when we don't really want them to win. And they probably will win a couple of games and essentially talk themselves out of a situation around that they'll have to deal with, which is if they ended up in a position to take one of the high-end quarterbacks come next April. The Jags, it's from turning attention back to Texans. Colin was on it last week, and I'm not blitzing. It was a surprise because the previous week against the Jags blitzed heavily, where there was a number 3-step dropbacks by CJ Stroud, and he was got to every time. And then in that particular game, you just wondered why they didn't go for it on that fourth down. and they went for that long field goal essentially because he was in a blender at that stage because the Jags had done a number on him, and they did a number on him yesterday. They were 1 for 12 and third down. It was a really, but the Jets defense has played well over the course of the year. That's not the problem. But if you're suggesting that the Jets are in the pecking order, I think is it a clickbait type of show tonight, Connor? Is it?
Colin, Nick Mullins is in from Minnesota. Josh Dobbs obviously just looked completely gun shy. He really looked like he had he had a bad case of it after the Chicago game last week. He seemed to have hit the reverse gear completely, unfortunately for the Vikings. They eked out the win, but probably the biggest, apart from the 3-0 scoreline, the biggest talking point from that game, unfortunately, was Justin Jefferson's comeback ending so short and in a very concerning way for Minnesota.
Yeah, although the good news today is that he's day to day. So that was, because obviously the concern when, you heard he immediately was taken to hospital was, what could this be? So that was good. But Connor, I think what people maybe need to understand about the scoreline was, some of the other scores, if you go back and people would point to some of the other scores, that was in the rain. Like the last one we saw was in a monsoon. Like that was a dome yesterday. You could not have asked.
And there was the snowplow game, the Patriots snowplow game, wasn't there back in the day? Like that was 3-0, but only because there was about 7 inches of snow on the field.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the pieces, like there was no no excuse for it. I think it was interesting in terms of, right, we talked in the early part of the season about like the defenses and the rise of the defense and how impressive they had been, and then offenses kind of struck back. It felt for a time, and it felt, I suppose, this week and maybe a little bit last week that, there were a couple of games, obviously, where you talked about Flacco, Jake Browning, the Ravens and the Rams in particular. But when you had, as Brian mentioned, the 2 games go in 0-0 at the half, I think it's telling. It's been a year where we have seen so many quarterbacks go down with injuries, and I wonder, Connor, what that might mean in terms of the way in which teams approach QB2 next year. And I wonder, Connor, might we see teams approach O-line play differently? Because it's felt over the past maybe couple of years in particular, we've seen teams kind of go away from, for the most part, right? It used to be that your backup O-line guys would be, 35, 36, 37-year-old vets. Now it tends to be guys who are, coming out on maybe 6th round picks. And I think that has had an impact on O-line play. I think that has had an impact on QBs possibly getting hurt, the number of times that they are getting sacked. I wonder, might that be something that we might see in the future potentially change? I don't know if it will. That's me idly speculating.
But it's a good point though, because you're going right back to the Joe Theismann thing. When suddenly people realized the value of, Michael Lewis literally got a whole book out of it, and the blindside offensive lineman, protecting the house insurance, protecting your most valuable asset. When you've got, and that was driven in turn by the big leap forward in terms of the Lawrence Taylor and other pass rushers, these incredibly athletic linebackers, which you hadn't seen in the NFL to that point. Now we've got all these hybrid defenders. You got bigger defensive backs. You got those hybrid kind of linebacker safety types. A guy like that comes at you on a blitz. It's no mean feat to stop him. And offenses are going to have to adjust, and the best way to adjust, as you say, is to keep the signal caller from feeling the heat.
Yeah, and I think what you've also seen this year is probably a willingness of defensive coordinators to blitz more, right? As they've seen, like Brian Flores obviously led the way; he's been doing it all year. But Vance Joseph has, turned the dial up to 11 over the past few weeks. Connor, he's sending, he's sending all sorts
It
at
almost
QB.
went out of fashion. It went to the point, Brian, where defensive coordinators, it was nearly seen as not manly if you were blitzing. Oh, you clearly can't get pressure with your front four. You're having to bring the house. Whereas, it's a legitimate option clearly, and the Floreses and others. I know Eberflus at Chicago as well before they brought in Montez Sweat. You got to make the best of what you have, and if blitzing is the best way to get pressure, if you don't happen to have a Chase Young or a Montez Sweat or another, or the sort of monsters that the Eagles have on your defensive line, then you got to get creative.
I'd love to see the numbers of blitzing against these particular quarterbacks who are deemed to be the backups that are stepping in, because you'd wonder how much blitzing would take place if they had the number one quarterback in there. I mean, like Jake Browning is playing so well for me because he's got so many, as you touched on, on the show, he's got so many players available to him. T. Higgins, Boyd, Jamar Chase, he's got loads of great weapons. Where other teams who don't and are very reliant, such as O'Connell last night, he's so reliant on Devontae Adams. And they're coming at him in spades last night. Brian Flores essentially took Devontae Adams out of the game for large parts. You wonder how much of the blitzing is down to the fact that they can go after these quarterbacks because they just don't have the skill set to manage the situation.
But the teams that have won with backups in place, one of the keys to it has been time to throw. Like, obviously, to get that right, you need the guys to dump it off to. But that's why the Tyson Bagans, the Tommy DeVitos have managed to have at least some success and not be immediately on their backs or running for their lives, because they've had to adjust to getting the ball out quicker and giving them the option to do so. Even if it means changing your offense, you don't want to be down to QB3 because QB2 is in the concussion protocol.
Yeah, but I think like Bengals, like Orlando Brown, some great celebrations yesterday. Like the Bengals offensive line collapsing, the cohesion that they have there hasn't really tailed off since Joe Burrow got injured. Like they are probably the most fruitful at the moment. That are able to protect the quarterback. He's getting the time to do it, and as I said, other teams are readjusting, and then there's some teams that just can't. Like we're looking at that game yesterday, as Colin said, it's not even like under adverse weather conditions. Like realistically, Dobbs and O'Connell, they're not going to be the answer in the long term. O'Connell maybe is a backup, but like Dobbs now in a situation, is Mullins the more beneficial situation now going forward? I mean, he understands this offense better. He's been there over the course of the year. They're on the road in Cincinnati this weekend. The tale of two backups, but ultimately I think we'll probably all lean Bengals come the weekend. But you'd have to wonder, because Dobbs' experience, once it was a great start and initially, it's fallen away, and it's fallen away badly.
And Dobbs' column, like the littlest hobo, might just be moving on.
Yeah, I mean, this is ultimately why it was worth the roll of the dice, right? They basically exchanged picks at the end. It was I'll spot you a pint and you can get me in the future. There wasn't anything in terms of the contract, and I guess for the Vikings, they'll have to see what way it rolls out. But when Kirk Cousins went down, they had to try something, right? And I think it was worth it. They got an initial bounce, and now it isn't. It hasn't. So they go back and they'll see. But I do think having Kevin O'Connell there is useful, no matter who is the QB.
And clearly, having Brian Flores, if you're only going to score 3 points, it helps not to concede any. Right there, we leave it for our second segment of Talking Points. Brian, I want to start off our third segment here. We said we'd get to who the actual contenders were for the Lombardi in our view at this point, and maybe look at why we're making the case, but also what deficiency or deficiencies they need to address if they are going to win it all. Let's start, and Fred's going to love this. Let's start in Dallas. Dak for MVP, Mike McCarthy Coach of the Year. How about them Cowboys?
It looks much better than it's looked for such a long time, and it's hard. You don't want to get carried away. One thing that really it annoyed me when I watched the game, and I don't know why. And I said it to Colin this morning, and it's right. The Collins would have called it out. If the Eagles run the table here, they win the division, and they've got the Seahawks to play on the road, Arizona, and the Giants twice. So with all due respect, they're all very winnable games. And I suppose maybe Seattle is that game that's a bit up in the air. If Gino comes back, it is in Seattle on a Monday night, so that's it's a tough game. But they navigate that one. You'd expect them to win the other three. And the Cowboys still don't win the division if they finish on the same record. For me, the difficulty, you have to win this division for me. They've got to win it because they got to avoid playing the 49ers because the 49ers have their number and they're also the best team in the league right now. So if you look at it today, the landscape of where everybody's at, it would be the Eagles potentially going into San Francisco come the divisional round as opposed to the Cowboys, as opposed to the Cowboys. And that for me is ultimately where they need to avoid them as much as possible and get the home games. If you look at their record this year over the course of the season, they've been very good on the road. In Dallas, they've been lights out. They've covered the spread in every game. They're putting up an average of 38 points. It was 33 last night. If they get either of those sides in the championship game in Dallas, I think potentially that could be the year in which the Cowboys find a way to get to Vegas. But if they've got to go on the road and they've got to go into San Fran, it's a different beast, and that's ultimately where I think the problem lies.
We were saying this last week, Colin, like, not that necessarily Santa Clara is the most intimidating place to visit, certainly in comparison to Lincoln Financial Field, say, or even Arlington, but it's just not taking advantage of dragging the 49ers across the country and putting them on the road. I mean, the number one seed in the NFC, you have to feel is nearly going to decide it all this year. And one interesting thing for me is the way things are shaping up. I don't see any opportunity for anybody to be resting their starters in week 18. I don't think it's going to shape out that way for any of them. You can't see somebody having a game clear heading into the playoffs, which means all of them probably are going to have to push really hard for it, but only one of them then gets the benefit of the bye and guaranteed home field advantage. But it is a prize very much worth fighting for this season. It is every season, but you feel it's going to be particularly key this season.
Yeah, but of course, I suppose the fact that it's Patrick Mahomes might be going on the road. We know playing at home makes an enormous difference. But
I'd actually forgotten he's never played an away playoff game.
Never played on the road. Now, the thing is, there will be surprises, right? There will undoubtedly at least one in the playoff when it comes to it, but. I suppose for the 49ers, Connor, it's all, to me, it is in relation to them staying healthy. I think, they are, if they can have their starters out there, yeah, they're going to be they are the favorites. And I believe rightly favorites. Does that mean again that they will definitely win it? No, but I felt everything about them is so good, and you can see the frustration of playing against them. Now DK tends to get hot a lot of the time anyway, but Fred Warner is so good, and that's what you're going up against, no matter how good you are.
You can see how so many teams have limped into their game the following week and lost back-to-back after losing to the 49ers. They're just, even in this game, so outrageously physical, so aggressive in every aspect of every single play all the time. Like, even the guys blocking downfield, like Brandon Ayuk is smashing guys for that Christian McCaffrey run. I think he ended up blocking about 3 players at various times. Even when you felt his work here was done, they just won't let themselves. There was, after the turnover, Christian McCaffrey nails Julian Love, the Seahawks safety, proper full-on tackle on him to bring him to the ground. I mean, they're so hungry, they're so aggressive that, to your point, you almost fear for them actually staying fit, given the way they put themselves about. There's no 80% effort in San Francisco, and it's very intimidating to watch, and it's very impressive to watch. But you just feel like they're such a finely tuned machine, Brian, at the same time, when it's all humming, when it's all 100%. But we've seen it without Trent Williams, we've seen it without Christian McCaffrey. It's very finely balanced, and it doesn't take much to tip it.
Yeah, and as you touched on, because of how competitive it is right now in the NFC, it looks like everybody essentially will have to win out, or at least be playing ultimately competitive games up to week 18, where last year the Eagles kind of had an opportunity to tail off, and there was a conversation whether Hurts was carrying the injury. There'll be no rest up for these teams.
We said this at the start of the season, that the Eagles, one of the things that you wanted to see this year was, like, the question mark last year, that they had a relatively easy run of it in the regular season. That's the schedule computer. That's not the Eagles' fault. You can only beat what's out in front of you. And the playoffs opened up for them, particularly because of the injury to Brock Purdy, which ended up making that NFC Championship game meaningless. You don't see that happening this year, and they've got a tougher regular season. So even if they played at the same level that they were at last year, and I don't think they're there, we're all in agreement on that. It was still going to be hard for them. However, down the stretch, it's Seahawks, Cardinals, Giants, which
twice.
With all due respect to the Giants, isn't the gauntlet that the Eagles have been on. So you could be turning around and looking at this after a successful Super Bowl run, saying, "Oh, this is the equivalent of the Rams going winless in November, the year they won it all." They go away, they think it up again, they come out of their toughest part of the season, and they've learned all the lessons they need to learn. If iron does sharpen iron, then that makes a strong case for the Eagles.
Yeah, absolutely. And bearing in mind that the Ravens played the 49ers for the NFC, which is a crucial game, both
and the Cowboys
AFC and
the
NFC.
Dolphins.
I mean, there's so many tough games to come, and like the Eagles are kind of outside the pain on that. So they would very much look at it. Win 4 games, we win the division, and we may even find ourselves, despite our flaws of late, still navigating a way of earning the 4th seed, and then ultimately then you get the week off, and 2 games at home to be back in the Super Bowl. I don't know what they'll win out, and it sounds a bit strange because I know you look at the paper and you say, "Oh, they're all very winnable," but it's very difficult to switch it on and get it really back in the groove that we would expect them, and everybody expects them. In the Seattle game, Seattle will have to win that game. So Seattle are they're playing well, if they're losing. Like yesterday, they held the 49ers. They only lose by 12. Everybody expected that to be a blowout with Drew Lock, a quarterback. They played really well in Dallas last week. Came at the wrong side of that game. At some stage, you would have to think something would go for them, and they'd find a way to navigate a victory. So I'm not convinced the Eagles will find a way to get back into that position. Ultimately, I think it's between them.
I'm smiling, Colin, because Drew Lock, you certainly coaxed the performance out of him. He took some inbound fire from you last week, and boy, did he show up.
Yeah, like, I mean, Drew was fine. Drew has got a big arm. Drew can make big time throws. Brian was highlighting the big time throws. Drew can also turn the ball over. He has the day Drew Lock plays a game where he doesn't put the ball in harm's way repeatedly.
Gunslinger, Colin. Everyone loves a gunslinger.
I mean, even the DK, the touchdown pass, like that was 80% DK making that catch. Like he had absolutely no right to do it. But he managed to.
Can I pause there, Colin? Because you just reminded me, if we don't get to the Broncos on this one, I'll kick myself. That Cortland Sutton grab was outrageous, even by his standards. I mean, 60 air yards on that ball, the longest touchdown pass thrown this season, the longest pass thrown this season by Russell Wilson. Cortland Sutton, contested catch, grabs it with one arm, kills it dead, doesn't even need the other arm to steady it. Remarkable.
Yeah, no, he's having his own kind of highlight reel. Remember the goal of the season competitions, and there's some that you look back on. There's certain months, and you're like, "Wow, this was unbelievable."
It was Tony Yeboah for Leeds. I remember ran his own goal of the season.
Yes, he did, and it seems like Cortland Sutton is kind of having his. I suppose on the topic of what we're talking, I don't think the Broncos are going to be a Super Bowl contender, but I think in terms of a turnaround, given I know we've got Keith in the comments, given where this Broncos team was, I think the fact that they're in a position to go, to the playoffs is very impressive. And I think next weekend, Connor, is going to be really interesting in terms of the Lions, because the Lions are really wobbling, and I was very excited about the Lions. I thought for the first 6 weeks, the Lions looked great. And then they got exposed. And as I talked about earlier, once you get it exposed and it's on tape, the Ravens dismantled the Lions when they went in to Baltimore at the end of October. And the Lions have obviously won some games since, but they haven't looked good on defense. Like the Chargers scored 38 on them. They were fortunate to beat your Bears when they did. Obviously, the Bears did a number on them. Like that wasn't like the Bears win this weekend wasn't a fluke at all. Like they could still be playing that, and the Bears would be winning it. Like
and to your point about pressure on the quarterback, I mean, no quarterback is the same when they're running for their life. But Jared Goff's stats, as we all know, just fall off a cliff when he's under P, and he has a less than 1 QBR when he's hurried, and you saw all of the worst of it at the weekend again.
He's had, sorry, Colin, I know you come back. He's had 10 turnovers in 3 weeks.
No, the thing with Goff is, if Goff can get rid of the ball in 2.5 seconds, he's great, right? But your issue for Jared Goff is it's like the antithesis of Russell Wilson in ways. He desperately wants to get rid of the football. If you can cover and you can prevent him from doing that, bad things tend to happen. He is the anti, because Russ has changed a little. He's the anti Josh Allen. Josh loves the chaos, right? He is happy to extend. He is happy to run. He is happy to do whatever. Goff is not like that at all. And teams, I suppose, are beginning to force that, to force them to play in certain ways. I still think they're very good offensively, but that defense, I don't see the Lions, making a deep playoff run because of that defense, Connor.
Brian, let's talk Kansas City. We talked about them briefly before, but in the context of contending, we've litigated this over a number of weeks. It wasn't a surprise what happened at the weekend. It's got to be doubly frustrating for Patrick Mahomes, given that he's probably got the best defense that he's had in his time in Kansas City, but the stuff that they've been doing so well for so long just isn't happening.
No, it's not happening. He did a really strange interview after the game in Frankfurt, obviously, which me and Colin attended, in which Peter King interviewed him on the pitch. And he said to Peter, "We will get it right. It's only a matter of time. I promise you." And it was like he was trying to convince, I heard the audio, like Peter King put it out on his own podcast. It was like he was trying to convince him and everybody around him. And obviously he's such a motivator within the camp. He's going to keep continuing saying the right things. But he doesn't have the players at his disposal.
And to be fair to him, it's not like he's been just leaning on Kelsey and he won't throw the ball anywhere else. I mean, he's been doing his level best to spread it around, to get guys into the game, to get guys targets, and they're just freaking dropping the ball.
Yeah, I mean, at what stage? Like, just if you remember week 1 against the Lions, like Kadarius Toney had all the, we haven't the memes today, but he had all the memes coming out of that week 1 game on the Friday morning and how many times he dropped the ball in that particular game. Like, he doesn't surprise me because I saw him first time to join, so I knew he was a numpty.
Oh, you were happy to see him get bounced from the club. No two ways about it.
Yeah, and then I was happy to see him make one great play in the Super Bowl last year as well. So, like, we all got our reaper.
One trick Tony.
Yeah, well, anyway, look, like they won a Super Bowl last year, and everybody was saying, "Oh, they won it in a collaborative approach. They spread the ball around the play." But ultimately, it's like any team. After the course of time, when you let one of your best players walk out or trade him, such as Tyreek Hill, and you try to make it out that we're better for it. Yeah, I suppose they have been better for it because ultimately they won the Super Bowl. But over the course of time, they're not better for it. You can see the ill effect now. There's no deep ball threat, realistically going down the field. It's all very conservative stuff, by and large. Just the odd big play to Kelsey. I think in a roundabout way, and this kind of sound bizarre, the playoffs might suit them because right now, and I know things will probably unfold in a very different manner. Right now, they play the Steelers in the wildcard game at home. You would expect, despite their flaws, that they would win that. And ultimately, it's going to come down to they're going to have to go on the road into Baltimore, and they're going to have to go on the road into the Miami and play one of those teams. And that's where, like right now, the Ravens, as good as they're playing, they don't strike me as a team with the killer punch. They were fortunate. I felt yesterday, even on the winning touchdown, there was 3 or 4 holes there that weren't called. Like Sean McVay was clearly looking at it in the disparity and how a whistle flag type of refereeing unit that they had yesterday completely missed numerous holes. But I mean, that's a side story. I just think if they get into a divisional round on the road, they might find a way to navigate a victory, but it's going to be really difficult to see them back in the Super Bowl again.
Let's talk Baltimore, Colin, as Brian calls them out. We've seen them dominant. You mentioned what they did to the Lions and what they did to the Seahawks. They basically kind of dismantled both of those teams and sent their seasons in very different directions. We were lavishing praise on the Todd Monken offense and how it was, getting the most out of Lamar Jackson. Not that he had an awful lot more to give, you felt, but they found other dimensions. They plugged in a couple of nice new additions this year, including Keaton Mitchell to make up for the absence of J.K. Dobbins, among others. They've lost Mark Andrews, but Isaiah Likely did a pretty decent impression over the weekend and might be useful for them down the stretch. But as Brian said, they were lucky enough to get out of dodge. They've lost some really bizarre games this year and shown the same worrying trend they did last year of finding themselves at times in double-digit leads and just taking the eye off the ball.
They have, but to me, I think they are. I think they are a fantastic team. I really do. And yeah, they've had some strange losses, but kind of you mentioned it earlier. The Rams team that won the Super Bowl lost 3 on the bounce. The Bucs team that won the Super Bowl had a really terrible start to that season.
They even lost to the Bears that year.
So they're, that will happen. It's the nature of the league. I think winning the way they did against the Rams could actually galvanize them, because they actually closed it out, and Lamar was playing so well, and Aaron Donald was really fired up for this, and there were he was desperately trying to get him, and I think the Rams have done a really good job on offense, especially right. Stafford is playing some really good stuff. There was that absolute beautiful rainbow pass, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. So this was a really good test, right, of Baltimore's defense that I think they did okay. Yeah, there were moments, but when you have a QB as good as Stafford and you have a receiver as good as Kupp, and they ultimately got the win. I think, especially if it has to go through Baltimore, with Roquan playing as well as he did. I mean, he was outstanding again at times. No one, it'll be a horrendous place to go in to try and win in January.
Yeah, absolutely. A place that would be lovely to visit in January, Brian, and a place that the Miami Dolphins won't want to leave is Hard Rock Stadium, where indeed they play later on tonight. The Dolphins are still very well placed to potentially nick this number 1 seed, which you feel is critical for them above all teams, because Miami, as we know, don't tend to travel well in the colder months.
Yeah, they've got to go to Baltimore for the end of the season. I don't think that could be the one that I suppose decides who gets the 1 seed. But then again, they've got to play the Cowboys, and the Ravens have got to go into San Francisco. I mean, they are essentially the marquee games for the remainder of the season. That dynamic of those 3 or 4 games are ultimately going to decide it. I would love to see the Dolphins make the Super Bowl, but I do ultimately believe it'll only be if they're playing at home. I think if they go on the road, they will unfortunately come up short. They just don't seem to have that inner belief to go on the road, and maybe come to playoffs it'll change if they were to go into Baltimore, for example, and win that game. That would maybe be the stepping stone. But then ultimately they'll end up playing the divisional round and the championship game at home based on that result. But I would love to see them there. Like a 49ers Dolphins Super Bowl for me, which strikes me of Super Bowl 19, Montana against Dan Marino, and famous Dan Marino quote after the game.
Are we a little bit too down on the Dolphins, though? I mean, they went on the road in the playoffs last year and they didn't pull out the win, but they were damn close playing with their backup quarterback.
But they played the Bills so well last year. Like, people forgot that going into that playoff game. They beat them the first time round. They nearly beat them on the Saturday night game. I think it would have been this weekend last year, and they lost on a late field goal. And then they went in there, like, they matched up well with the Bills, and they didn't match up well the first time round. Maybe they'll address that come week 18 when they play each other. But they've always kind of ran the Bills quite tight, so it didn't come as a surprise in that game. I know when we did our preview last year, we said if they play in the manner in which they did that Saturday night game, they could cause a surprise. It wasn't to be. But this is a different team this year. It feels very different. Tua's had no injuries. You see all the various different stuff coming out of Hard Knock Show. They look like a team that are very much together. We saw a very strong performance defensively in Frankfurt and over the course of the season.
I'll never believe Hard Knocks again after the Jets, Brian. I'll never believe Hard Knocks again. Like pure fantasy. Beautiful. Yeah, well,
the head coach
scenes created for your entertainment.
The head coach is I don't know if it's comedy gold or whether it's because some of the stuff, and he's quite eccentric in terms of some of the stuff.
Imagine him in Super Bowl week. Like, I really do hope the Dolphins get to the Super Bowl for multiple reasons, like because of how entertaining they are to watch, because of the brilliance of the talent that they have, but also because of him. Like, he's just going to be box office.
Well, we saw some of the snippets when he was in Frankfurt, how entertaining he was, but like I think ultimately it's going to come down to that Ravens game, because ultimately Colin was picked on it there. Like if the Ravens are hosting games, home field advantage throughout the course of the playoffs, ultimately you would expect them to make the Super Bowl. Where if the Baltimore have to go into Miami, well, you sit here today and probably say you'd probably slightly lean Dolphins potentially as the favourites for the game. You know, and imagine Crimbet would have them as favourites. You wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens were to go in there and over them. It doesn't strike you as the kind of venue that would be daunting for a road team. And maybe come January, it won't be as hot as it is. I don't know if you saw the coverage recently where how they specified the heat temperature they wanted on the sideline of the opposing team. But it won't be as hot come the playoffs, and maybe that again would allow for the Ravens to go in there and win.
Dolphins are third in the Super Bowl betting as well. I was checking the odds on Crimbet earlier on today, and rightly so, given the way they've been playing. We'll see whether that stacks up tonight. If they tack another win on, and the kind of games will have suited them over this weekend, bar the Ravens win. They won't have been in any way disappointed to see Jacksonville and Kansas City drop games. That puts them right in the mix, or puts them right back in the mix. Colin, one final point we wanted to make before we wrap up this evening, very much at the other end of the table now. We go right down from the contenders. The Bears are sitting with that #1 overall draft pick via Carolina, who certainly don't seem like they're going to relinquish it. And given the way that they've been performing, even since Frank Reich was sacked, there was no bounce there. And they look like they're heading for the worst record overall. We've been thinking about what the Bears should do with that, because given the way Justin Fields has played over recent weeks, and disrupted with the thumb injury though he's been, he's posted the best consistent passer rating of his career. You know, the Bears are now 5-4 over the last 9 games, having started 0-4. In what scenario do the Bears decide to trade down from this #1 pick rather than go in and take one of these blue chip prospects that we've heard no end of comment about, a generational class, be it Caleb Williams, Drake May, Bo Nix, even Penix, all these guys lined up to make the jump to the NFL? Would that be the right move for the Bears to make, or the wrong move?
Oh, it's an interesting quandary, I suppose, in certain respects, Connor. And I think, like, this is where I wish the Bears had just gone with Fields from the very outset. Remember, like, this nonsense that, like,
as Mike Florio said to us last week, dysfunctional franchises do dysfunctional things, Colin.
Yes, and like, again, what you should be looking to do is to endeavor to find out what you have as quickly as possible, right? And then decide, are you going to build around it, or what are you going to do? And like, can we say with certainty that Justin Fields is the guy? I don't think we can. Can we say with certainty that he's not the guy? I don't think we can either. The Bears have done a better job this year of putting talent around him, and he has begun to flourish. I suppose, to me, the concern I would have, Connor, is it feels like he's had injuries of some sort almost every year, but at the same time, you look at you look at this year, right, and you look at, say, what the Panthers and Bryce Young, right, and you can mortgage your future on the hope that it goes right. And there's that. And then there's obviously CJ Stroud down in Houston, but you're rolling the dice. And if Fields continues to progress and the Bears continue to improve, are you willing, depending on the haul that you're going to get? And I think probably it's widely regarded that Caleb Williams and Drake May are better prospects. That doesn't mean it'll work out, but are you more likely to get a haul for them? And if you are the Bears and you can get, say, 3, you probably get, you're giving your own, so 2 future #1s and maybe 2 future #2s, right? Is that better?
And you're much more likely to hit on a first-round receiving prospect. The precedents have shown, like a Marvin Harrison Jr., than you are to hit on the quarterback. So you get, as you say, multiple first-rounders. You get a top receiver. You get a top O-lineman or pass rusher. The Bears still have numerous holes on the roster. Here's how I weigh it up, right? If you decide, like, let's say the Bears run the table from here, it's highly unlikely, even though some of those games I think are winnable, to be fair. If they finish up 9-8 on the fringes of playoff contention, I don't think there's any way you're getting rid of Fields. I think Eberflus is there. He's saved his job. and we're looking at the Bears maybe in a very different light. And he's proven he's the guy at that stage. If he's consistently delivering the kind of performance he delivered, like if what we saw last weekend was the base, similar to what we saw against the Commanders, in fairness to him, put up a couple of really good performances against Denver and against the Lions in that game that the Bears blew that we talked about earlier. The problem with all of this is it's the clock and the rookie contract and what that enables you to do. If you roll with Fields next year, you're basically saying we're going to win a Super Bowl within 2 years. If you can't say that, then what are you doing? Because that's the game. That's the whole shooting match. There's no Champions League. There's no cup competitions. You're either winning a Super Bowl or you're not. So you're going to say, by the time that we come to do that extension, we'll have won the Super Bowl and we have our guy, or else it's the wrong bet. Now, I take what you're saying about, the roll of the dice on Caleb Williams. We've seen it with Zach Wilson. We've seen it with Baker Mayfield. We've seen it with Johnny Manziel. God between us and all harm. Like, it can go spectacularly wrong. You don't really know what you have until you have it. The one counter I would have to that, though, is the Rams with Jared Goff. Because you can build your whole team around the rookie quarterback, even if it's the wrong rookie quarterback, and you still have the team. And then it's about, I know you don't know where you're going to be in 4 years and whether you will be able to get the right guy to plug in the way Stafford did, or the way McVay did with Stafford, or the way that the Bucs were able to do with Tom Brady. But you can do, you've a longer window if you do take that guy. Now, for that to happen, you need to have certainty. And I think ultimately, if you don't know, then the answer is no, because it's too heartbreaking to have to reset the clock all over again and to go into that horrible teardown and rebuild. The Bears have been through it. They don't want to go through it again. I think unless you're absolutely certain that it's Justin, you got to use that number one pick and take your guy. And you're probably bringing in a new coach, an offensive-minded head coach, to do it.
I'm not entirely convinced now that they will really relieve the head coach of his duties. Last week I was quite adamant when you said, Connor, I was looking at it today. I mean,
well, if he finishes up with 6 or 7 wins, I think it's very difficult, and he's on the cusp of it now.
He lost his defensive coordinator very early on in the season. He lost his running back coach early on in the season. There's been sweeping changes, shall we say, because of the nature.
He also chose both of those guys.
Well, that's true, but there's been unforeseen circumstances in terms of personal situations that obviously led to some of the departures. One was a high HR issue, so that's just not doing your due diligence. Sorry, I'm very harsh. Well, okay, fair enough. Well, ultimately, they've beaten the Lions. They should have beaten the Lions the first time round. They beat the Vikings. And you're saying about running the table, and I think this is bizarre to say, but I don't think it's against the realms of possibility that they win the next 3. I know the Browns have had a really good win, but their defense, the Bears' defense, has kind of showed up as well over the course of the last 3 weeks. Let's not forget that they've been playing quite well. Then they play the Cardinals, and then thereafter they have the Falcons at home before they say the Packers in the last game of the season. I know you joked about it today in terms of running the table, but it isn't against the realms of possibility. I certainly think the Falcons and the Cardinals games are both very winnable games.
I think they'll be competitive in all of those games. I'm not sure they'll win all 4 of them. I could see them winning 2 more. I picked them to win 6 at the start of the season. I think they'll get there and maybe go 1 more, and it might make it interesting.
Yeah, that kind of makes it even more difficult then, because then you're kind of, it's a stumbling block for both scenarios. It's the quarterback scenario, you're still unsure, and you've got a head coach. But ultimately, I think they would end up, because Ryan Poles kind of had 2 years to look at it, I think ultimately he would then rip it all apart and go again. But that's personally how I think it'll play out, as opposed to the scenario where they win the 4 or 5 games and they fall into a playoff spot because of the nature of how poor the wildcard places are at the 7th seed. I mean, we recall when the Commanders got into the playoffs by winning a very poor NFC East, they quickly got escorted out of the playoffs the following weekend by the Bucs. And ultimately, I think that's what will probably happen for whatever team ends up in the 7th seed, maybe. And then it's not even that thing. You go from picking at 10, potentially picking at 20, or thereabouts, because of the nature of the flip-flop situation with making the playoffs. So, look, there's plenty of storylines ahead over the course of the next few weeks, and they could be put to bed next weekend if the Browns show up and beat them. But
it's still kind of nuts to me that in heading into week 15, we're talking about Bears and playoffs as if that could possibly be a thing. Anyway, Colin.
Connor, to get your thoughts on it, and I know you probably haven't had the opportunity to really kind of delve into this, but to take a QB at number 1 overall, and yeah, I mean, I suppose the Bears are slightly in a slightly better position than maybe some, right? In that they aren't taking it when they are really in the doldrums. But you're talking about a QB to live up to that needs to be very, very special. So you need them to be a Peyton Manning, you need them to be a Troy Aikman, or otherwise you're talking about like moving on from Justin Fields and potentially them being not Jamarcus Russell, right, but more of an Alex Smith. And are you convinced that Drake May and I think if you're taking a QB, the Bears are taking a QB, it means they've moved on from Eberflus.
Yeah.
So do you believe that the QBs on offer are generational, and who would you want to guide that QB? I suppose.
I mean, without being facetious, nobody's generational until you actually see them playing in the NFL. And look, we've seen the hype train be derailed so many times in so many seasons, and all these consensus number 1 and number 2 picks turn out to be, so much fluff. Now, there is a scenario in which they could trade out of the 1 pick and maybe pick a 2 or 3. There's a way they could finagle it so they're not. It depends on which guy they want and if they're in love with the guy. And Poles has said this clearly. He said it last season, and there was a certain degree of criticism about him maybe seeming not to be fully backing Fields. But I think he was kind of slightly wise there as well, because it's not his quarterback. He didn't draft him. And to your point, I don't think the Bears want to be in the same scenario that they were in with Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, which was a stupid and terrible way to run the thing, where they let a lame duck general manager and a head coach pick a quarterback that they were never going to lean on or build a team around, because they needed to win games quickly. So they bring in Andy Dalton, built the offense around him. He goes down injured. They reluctantly put Justin Fields in. They don't utilize his talents at all, and they absolutely waste a year. Like, you're better off cleaning house and starting again. And if you're Ryan Poles and you're interested in job security, as I'm sure Ryan Poles is, you'd be better off going out there and maybe getting Ben Johnson as, the perceived best young offensive mind and the guy most likely to turn your franchise around and be this season's Shane Steichen. Otherwise, if you're rolling with Eberflus again and you bring in a new offensive coordinator, if it doesn't turn around quickly, then Ryan Poles is probably going to be out the door as well. So he'll be wise enough to do that. He's a smart enough guy to figure all that stuff out. So there's a lot of different combinations and permutations. But you've set the bar, to your point, at least as high as what we've seen Justin Fields at his best. And that's no mean feat for any quarterback coming into the league to hit. Like, I still believe Justin Fields has a special talent. Has a special talent and is a special talent are two slightly different things. I think in certain moments he really does flash, and it's amazing to watch. And yesterday's game was probably one of the cleanest Justin Fields games we've seen. No fumbles, no turnovers, good decision making. Missed a couple of open throws, but then you get, the sensational free play, the 4th and 13. If Aaron Rodgers had done that a couple of years ago, people would have been purring about it for weeks. Gets them to jump offside on 14-13, throws a rope, or 4th and 13 rather, throws a rope to DJ Moore and blows the game open. Again, busted play that he runs in for the touchdown, having, to be fair, missed a wide open Darnell Mooney the play before. He can do those things, and when you don't get the downside, when you don't get the eating stupid sacks and taking bad fumbles and making poor decisions, which he hasn't been doing, to be fair to him, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, there's a sense that maybe you have the guy. And I think a bird in the hand, to your point, maybe worth 2 Caleb Williams or Drake Mays in the bush, but that's not the worst position for the Bears to be in, to actually have that choice to make. There are definitely worse scenarios in the league right now.
Can I just make one final point? We're working under the assumption the Panthers are not going to win another game for the remainder of the season. I don't know if that's the case or not.
I don't know.
I think things are quite unfortunate for them in terms of the manner how games are playing out. They were in that game for large part, Jesse. I'm just saying, I'm looking at their schedule. They've got to play the Falcons at home and the Bucs. I'm just thinking, we've seen it before. We've seen some quick results. Remember the Jets going in there when no one gave them a cat and hell's chance of beating the Rams, and they go in and they win the last 2 games, and then they find themselves losing out on Trevor Lawrence. I'm just saying, you never know. So
even if they win another game, does it make a difference? Where does 2 wins get them? They'll still end up first overall.
just something on that, right? Because an interesting thing that popped up, the Panthers fans were calling for Thomas Brown to be sacked and wanted him moved on. And his wife posted that he has been sacked, but they're leaving him in situ to take the flak and to call the plays. Once again, David Tepper proving what an intrepid, incredible owner he is. Absolute fantastic foresight. So a guy who knows that he is out of a job in a few weeks, and he's the guy who's calling the plays for the guy that you have invested millions in, that you want to be the future of your franchise. They were talking about it on the broadcast if people were watching it last night. One of the big issues with Bryce Young is his footwork. Yeah, I'm sure Thomas Brown is going to spend night and day. I'm sure he's going to live in the facility to help Bryce Young when he knows he's going to be out of a job. Two very, very quick points, Connor. One thing just that I didn't get to mention that Fred will like this, an X factor for the Cowboys. They have the best kicker in the league right now. He is absolutely sensational, absolutely incredible, and that could be a real boost.
What a turnaround for last year when Maher was a liability. Like, God, Brandon Aubrey looks like he could kick them from the other end zone.
Oh, yeah, from the car park, I think. And the other is Brian will
like Shawnee O'Shea, All-Ireland runner-up this year.
If people have not seen, and Brian should see this, if people haven't seen what Tommy Cutlets is wearing to the stadium, it looks like something I'd wear. Absolutely fantastic. Kudos to him. And I hope for that reason alone that I'm wrong. I'm still picking the Packers, but I hope the Giants do it purely on the basis of Tommy's terrific top tonight.
If the Giants win, you'd be advised to leave your phones on mute, guys. There could be some, karaoke at 4:45 in the morning.
On that happy note, we'll leave you to go and enjoy your pre-game meal of veal ragu and go watch Tommy Cutlets do his thing. Enjoy. We'll be back with you very soon.